Hey gamers, Metallic Rock here, back with more SOD. In the last video, we talked about the experience of leveling a Warlock in this Season of Discovery, and now another week has passed, so I think it's time we take a look at Warlock tanks, as well as tanks as a whole, for this first phase. Let's waste no time here. Is Warlock a good tank? Well, yes, it's a good tank. Thanks for watching. Okay, let's rephrase the question to something a little more interesting. Will tank lock be meta? So far on my Warlock, I've had time to tank a few dungeons as well as some as the BFD raid, and the first thing I'll say about tanking the dungeons is that it was really fun. Warlock being a mana-based tank that can multi-dot things to hold aggro is really interesting. The self-healing you get from running Master Channeler, giving you even more single-target aggro from Drain Life, the battle res from Soulstone, the ability to have health stones and health potions, the ability to run Voidwalker if you think you'll need an extra big sack in a pull. Warlock has a lot of choice and a lot of self-utility. That's all great, but when it comes to classic tanking, the thing that really matters is, can the tank hold aggro? Single target is going to be no problem for a Warlock tank. You can put up to 4 dots if you're running Master Channeler and then spam Searing Pain on CD, possibly boosted by Incinerate or Lake of Fire, depending on your setup. On top of that, really no tank should have too many issues with single target aggro in SOD, as every tank has a taunt now, including the newer tanks of Rogue, Shaman, and Warlock, with Warlock having a 10-second CD, no mana cost taunt. Single target is squared away, so what about AoE? The way that Warlock tanks in AoE is a bit different than other tanks. Ideally, you want to get all your dots rolling as early as possible. This means pulling with Incinerate, Immolate, and then putting Corruption up ASAP. The more I play my lock tank, the more doomer I am about this whole Incinerate, Immolate thing, but more on that later. Next, similar to other tanks, think Warrior Sunder Armor here. You'll want to hit everything with 1 Searing Pain, at least. Hit your Shadow Cleave on CD to hit 3 mobs in melee range, to help keep AoE aggro. If you're running Master Channeler, keep Drain Life on your main target and maintain your dots, and that's it. Don't forget you'll have Taunt, AoE Taunt, and Searing Pain if anything breaks out. But other than that, your rotation is honestly life tap. No, I'm not kidding. If your healer is healing you and keeping you topped up, you should be actively using the healer's mana bar as your mana bar. And this is where I think lock tanks will mess up the most. Understanding a raid encounter enough to know when the right time is to life tap and get your mana back will be important. Hint if you're not sure, just life tap when the other tank taunts. In dungeons, don't be afraid to just slam life tap to keep the whole group moving. As a Warlock, you should not ever be drinking in dungeons with very few exceptions. Obviously, don't be an ass about it, watch your healer's mana, but if you have health and need mana, life tap. Without mana, you aren't going to hold threat. This is another reason why I prefer Master Channeler over the idea of Rain of Fire. This brings me to my main gripe with Lock Tank, and its spell pushback. I understand they can't do anything about it, otherwise it would probably be too strong. But in dungeons, trying to keep up Incinerate and Immolate on targets is just impossible with pushback. This effect can be lessened with a good priest and comms who can bubble you when you need to reapply Incinerate, but it's honestly not worth it. In dungeons, I would suggest running Demonic Grace for defensiveness if you need it, and otherwise just running Everlasting Affliction, which is easier than ever to get now that Blizzard lowered the rep requirement from Honored to Friendly in order to get the runes. And not having to reapply Corruption will help more with mana too. In Raid, I felt that Warlock performed fine. I was an off tank for a friend who was main tanking as a warrior, and there was never a time where I felt like being on a Warlock was a detriment to the group. Except after a few wipes. If you think you might wipe in the raid, empty your whole bags out. Everything into the bank or something, mail it to an alt, fill your whole bags with soul shards. This doesn't matter so much in dungeons, but in raids where there's less trash, trust me, most groups wipe to the second to last boss. Several times. Bring lots of soul shards. My subjective experience isn't going to be enough to determine if Warlock is going to be a meta tank, so I took a look at Wowhead's tier list as well as Warcraft logs, you know, to get some statistics. Numbers never lie, etc. Wowhead has Warlock placed in A tier behind Paladin, with Warrior and Shaman at the top, and Druid and Rogue at the bottom. But how does this stack up to real-world runs? Here, we can see that for BFD using aggregate DPS, Rogue is well at the top, followed by the other classes with Shaman, a supposed A tier spec, at the bottom. Why is this? Well, rogues do big damage. Most rogue tanks are probably running the Saber/Bleed rune, which helps to hold aggro, and the reason that Wowhead has them listed so low is simply for the second to last boss, Twilight Lord Kel'Rus, which most groups already struggle on. Kel'Rus doesn't really melee, and does a lot of magic damage. Survivability isn't really a factor for meta tanks in Classic over threat generation, up until the point that it is, and then survivability is the only factor. Rogues have low health totals, unlike a warrior or paladin, and 0 self-healing, unlike warlocks, and again paladins. Rogues are relying mostly on parrying and dodging as their mitigation, so a caster boss is kind of a bit difficult for them. Rogues do have a kick, and 3 kicks are required, I think, to keep this boss on lockdown. So with a well-coordinated group, a rogue could actually be a perfectly viable tank for Twilight Lord Kelrus. You can also see here on Warcraft logs that there are so many less recorded logs of tank rogues, up to 20 times that from warriors. So maybe the rogues that are logged so far are godly gamers, and the rogue damage numbers will normalize as us plebs catch up. My rogue tank hit 20 as of today, so next video should be covering rogue tank in more depth. Looking at the top 100 tank logs, there are a total of 4 paladins, 14 rogues, 4 warlocks, 1 shaman, 0 druids, leaving 77 warriors. So perhaps nothing changes. Will warriors end up at the top of Season of Discovery? Maybe these people are just prepping for the later phases when warrior is already the best tank and will now have added runes to make them even more powerful. Maybe you feel bad having watched this video, losing all excitement to play your tank druid for your guild. But do not despair. Do not fret. This is WoW Classic. The game isn't that hard. You don't have to play meta. None of these tanks are holding aggro in a dungeon when a mage sends both Living Bomb and Living Flame at the same time. Dude, when the Living Bomb goes off, man, that's just it for me. Hell, none of these tanks are even meta. Right now, all these tanks lose to this guy. Just remember, nothing matters, and eventually everything evolves into a crab, including you. Thanks for watching. I'll be back soon with a rogue tank video. You can catch me live at twitch.tv/metallicrock or on Twitter at metallicrock_, links in the description. Let me know how your journey is going in Season of Discovery. Are you playing a warlock tank? Are you even playing a tank? If not, why did you watch this? Peace out.